Hey, just a thought. I was thinking about this earlier. Next Sunday is July 2nd. How many of you will be in town over 4th of July weekend? All right, most of us. Let's do this. Next week, let's take a pause. We've been going through Genesis chapter by chapter, but let's take a pause next week. And I just, kind of a wild hair, because we're wild and crazy. But I think next week, let's take some time just to talk about our nation and take some time just to pray for our nation. Just looking at that, if you know me, you know that I absolutely love 4th of July. And, it's amazing. What other day of the year can you go to multiple parties and get watermelon at every one of them? What other day of the year can you legally blow things up? It's an amazing day. I love our country, but we just need to pray for our country. There's just a lot going on. And I just think it would be good for us to be able to take some time next week on a Sunday just to recognize, look at Scripture, and see the promises that the Lord has given us in regards to nations, and just take some time to refocus and pray. So don't think of it in terms right now. I know some of you are like, oh man, we're just going to get together and we're going to have to kneel on a cement floor and just pray the whole time. That's not what I'm talking about. But we want to take time just to be able to refocus on that. So if you would come and join us for that. With that, we are going to be in Genesis chapter 26 today, looking at the entire chapter from verse 1 through the end. We have been in a series going through Genesis. We started it at the beginning of this year and making good progress through it. But I ask, as we get into this, just for us to remember why it is that we are here. Yesterday I was so glad I was wearing sunglasses as I was just walking and listening to some music. I hit this song that was all about the blood of Christ, about how we're forgiven, we're redeemed, washed clean, about how there is new power and we're changed because of the blood of Christ. And you know what was incredible with that was it was just so overwhelming to me. Am I cutting in and out? Okay. I thought maybe, I didn't know if I was having a stroke or if it was that. So, okay. I'll just keep talking. Okay. It's good. You guys can, if you get every other word, you can kind of figure it out what's happening. And we'll just roll with that. But I was on this walk and literally I was glad I had sunglasses on because I just started crying just with joy, just recognizing what it is that Jesus Christ has done for us. A lot of times you'll see churches that brand themselves really well. And it's one of the things I'm trying to be careful of as the pastor of this church. We spent time this last week out at our new property looking at how we're going to do our signs and get our name up there so people know what church that is. And at the same time, I don't ever want us to just be known as like CTKers or something like that. I just want to talk about Christ. I want to look at the character of God and what he's done. And I don't know what our reputation is in this community. I think I know. I hope I know. But, it's just one of those things. I hope we're never just known for being that group. I want us to be known as the people that are just head over and heels in love with God. And that's what we're looking at with this. Today, as we look at Isaac, this is one of the only chapters in Genesis that really deals with Isaac, the patriarch. And he's not talked about as much as his father. He's not talked about as much of his son. But there is this section in here. As we read through this, you might notice this. This is not a flashy chapter. In some ways, when you read commentaries on this, or if you look at a lot of people who preach through Genesis, they actually skip this chapter because there's just nothing incredibly exciting about it. And yet, we believe that all Scripture is God-breathed and useful. So we want to take time to look at this today, and we're going to do just a running commentary, reading through it and stopping at 3 different times just to see what gold we can mine out of this. So here we go. Genesis chapter 26, verse 1. Now there was a famine in the land, besides the former famine that was in the days of Abraham. And Isaac went to Gerar, to Abimelech, king of the Philistines. And the Lord appeared to him and said, "Do not go down to Egypt. Dwell in the land of which I shall tell you. Sojourn in this land, and I will be with you and will bless you. For you and to your offspring I will give all these lands. I will establish the oath that I swore to Abraham your father. I will multiply your offspring as the stars of the heaven, and I will give to your offspring all these lands. And in your offspring all the nations of the earth shall be blessed, because Abraham obeyed my voice and kept my charge, my commandments, my statutes, and my laws." You look at this, and this is an important little passage that we read. We've been reading for chapter after chapter after chapter about how God called Abraham out of Ur of the Chaldeans. It's a place that is in modern-day Babylon, modern-day Iraq. And, he called him out of that, said, hey, leave your land, your home, your people, and go to the place I will show you. Abraham walked in faith. He walked in faith for decade after decade after decade, seeking the Lord. He was known as a man of God. People called him a prophet or a seer. And God blessed him time and time again. He said to Abraham, I will give you land. I will give you children. I will give you authority. I will give you an eternal blessing that will bless the rest of the earth. And now what we have with Isaac, Abraham's son, the son of promise, that God is repeating this to Isaac. Up until now, we haven't heard this. We don't have any indicator. Even if you look at the story of the sacrifice that took place where Isaac went with his dad, Abraham, up the hill, and they sacrificed a goat and stuff and all this stuff. You don't have anywhere recorded until now that Isaac heard these promises himself. But now we get this. God is speaking to the next generation and saying, I'm going to bless you. I'm going to bless you. And this is a theme that just keeps coming up, and I love this about Genesis. It's something I love about what we're seeing God do in this church. This is a book of the Bible that talks about generations, going from Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, and then Jacob's 12 sons. Then you go to the next book and you fast forward a few hundred years, and suddenly you have the book of Exodus with Moses, and there are so many Israelites. You see this family expand and grow, and the blessings of the Lord come down generation after generation after generation. I love that. And it's just a theme I want to keep pounding away at. Our church is a generational church. You look around. Let's just do this for a second. Look around, if you would. Look at the color of hair here, right? We have white hair, blonde hair, brown hair, dark hair, no hair, right? Representing all kinds of generations. You look at all the children that went out and are in our children's ministry. On second service, the teens that come, and then they go out to their classes and stuff. You just see this generation. A lot of you are like me. I come and I see my kids here, and I see my grandkids here. The difference is your kids don't heckle you while you preach. But you look at it, and it's a beautiful thing to see. God moves generationally through people. And I love verse 5. God is pointing out and directing Isaac, reminding him that his father obeyed God's voice. He kept the charge, he obeyed the commandments, the statutes, and the laws. It's a little bit Interesting when we see that last word, laws, because was the law of Moses given yet? No. No, it wasn't. That word laws can also be translated teachings over and over again. It's one of those things you can read about it when you hear it in the New Testament. Sometimes it's referring to the law of Moses. Other times it's just referring to the teachings of God. These people knew God. They knew the requirements that he had, and they were walking in them. And it's an encouragement for Isaac, a reminder, I am blessing you the way I blessed your father. But remember, he walked with me. And that's one of the greatest things about the story of Abraham. He walked with God all the way from one nation to another land. Everywhere he went, he was known as someone who would stop, build an altar, and worship the Lord. Everywhere he went. Absolutely amazing. You know that when you read the Bible, there are promises that are given to us. Like we look at this is a direct promise to Isaac in this. It would be false teaching if I took this and I said, and because you're here today, God is going to promise you, land and offspring and stuff like that. This is directly to Isaac. But when you read the Bible, from Genesis through Revelation, there are other places where God gives promises that are for all of his people. For all of his people. When you hear those, when you read them, thank him, bless him, and most importantly, walk with him. The story goes on in verse 6, and we read this. So Isaac settled in Gerar. When the men of the place asked him about his wife, he said, "She is my sister," for he feared to say, "She's my wife," thinking, lest the men of this place should kill me because of Rebekah, because she was attractive in appearance. And when he had been there a long time, Abimelech, king of the Philistines, looked out of a window and saw Isaac laughing with Rebekah, his wife. So Abimelech called Isaac and said, "Behold, she is your wife. How then could you say she is my sister?" And Isaac said to him, "Because I thought, lest I die because of her." Abimelech said, "What is this you have done to us? One of the people might have easily have lain with your wife, and you would have brought guilt upon us." So Abimelech warned all the people, saying, "Whoever touches this man or his wife shall surely be put to death." Wow, this story just took a really fast turn, right? You go from Isaac, he is the son of promise. God has done things in his family. He hears this incredible promise. God tells him, "Hey, look, I'm going to give you land, this land that you're in." In fact, if you were to go and underline in those first few verses that I read, the word land is repeated multiple times. Stay here in this land. Don't go down to Egypt. That's what your father did when there was a famine. He went to Egypt. Don't do that. Okay. So he stays there in the land. He didn't go to Egypt like Abraham did. When Abraham went to Egypt, what happened there? He was afraid that Pharaoh would kill him because his wife was beautiful. And so he told Pharaoh, "This is actually my sister." And so what happened? Pharaoh took Sarah and was going to make her a concubine, and God had to stop it. Later, Abraham did the same exact thing again, decades later, this time with the king of the Philistines, Abimelech. Notice Abimelech is not a name, it's a title, just like Pharaoh. He did the same thing twice. Abraham feared for his life, so he tells this lie. What in the world? What in the world? Again, just think about that. Think about that. In the type of people we look up to as godly people, as leaders, what is going on here? God just said to Isaac, I'm going to bless you. I'm going to give you this land. Did Isaac need to fear for his life? No. No, he has this lapse in his faith, a lapse in his judgment. He falls back into the same type of sin issue of lying out of cowardice that his father had. And luckily, Abimelech just happens to notice Rebekah and Isaac laughing with each other. A couple things on that. Isaac's name is actually He Laughs. And so in the Hebrew, there's a play on words that's happening there. But that phrase there, He Laughs, means that they were making whoopee. We tame things down when we translate to English so often. Okay. I guess for some reason I'm taming it down. I've been told because first service is on YouTube that I'm much more tame, and second service people are like that they get the real thing. Maybe that's the case. I don't know. Come to second service and you be the judge. But you look at this, and he just happens to look out, and he's like, yeah, no, there's no way that's brother and sister. They are clearly husband and wife. What is going on with this? Sometimes in some churches, we're taught a theology of generational curses. I get the idea behind generational curses, but that theology is built usually on verses that are taken out of context. There are blessings that are generational, but I want to sort of dismantle the idea of generational curses because when you really get into it with a lot of people that'll teach that, they get to the point with curses where they blow it up bigger than what the Bible does, and it starts sounding a lot more like New Age. So you might hear things like this. You've put a curse on yourself if you wake up in the morning and you look in the mirror and you say something like, wow, I'm fat. And that you've just put a curse on yourself and you're going to be fat. And so, in order to break that curse, you need to look in the mirror and say to yourself, I'm skinny. And if you really want to break it, you need to say it a certain amount of times, usually very biblical numbers like 3, 7, or 40. I don't know why they never say the 120, but you have to break the curse this way. And a lot of times in the teachings, it's you've not only done that, but you end up putting a curse on yourself and on your children and on their children until somehow it's broken. That's not really what the Bible talks about. And I think we don't need to spiritualize it. A lot of times as Christians, we're guilty of over-spiritualizing things. And it's something that we always need to be aware of. I do believe in generational sin issues, though. Why? Because as much as when we're younger, we look at our parents and we say, yeah, I'm never going to do that. What ends up happening? We do just that. It might be genetic, and there are propensities we have built into our genes. A lot of times it's simply just the modeling that we have, and we fall into the same traps because of the model. I remember years ago talking with a gentleman whose wife had passed away unexpectedly, and a couple years later he got remarried. And for the first few months, things were bliss, and then suddenly they were having to go to marriage counseling. This Christian man was kind of surprised because he was like, I've been married for decades before my wife died. I thought I was a good husband, but once I got remarried, I started discovering something was wrong in the marriage. I thought it was her. And then they went to counseling and he found out it's me. He was doing things in his marriage with his second wife that he thought was okay. He was contrary with her. She said up, he said down, she said go, he said stop, always the opposites. He would have flashes of anger with her. He was short. He talked down to her, not short like me, short fused. He would talk down to her, and he thought he was fine. What had happened is that he grew up in a family where that's how the father acted, and his wife, first wife, grew up in the family where that's how her father treated her mother. And so they both spent decades of marriage thinking that the anger, the flashes of rage, all these things were just normal in how marriage works. It wasn't until this Christian man was older with a second wife that he finally discovered, wait, that's not how this is supposed to work. It was something that was modeled for both of these people through the generations. It was a blind spot. He didn't even know it was there. He thought he was fine. And that's the thing that's kind of scary when you look at a story like this in the Bible. Some scholars that pick apart the Bible try to say this isn't a separate story, it's just the same story repeated with a different name. No, they totally miss the point. The point is, even the patriarchs were sinners. And those sins were things that bled through the family generation after generation after generation. It's what they saw, what they knew, what they learned. Even somebody who is walking with the Lord, who is experiencing the promises of God, fall prey to temptation and sin. And a lot of times we're blind to it. We don't even realize that it's there because it's just what we've always known. That's the beautiful thing about the Word of God is when we read through it, it's a mirror that shows us who we are. It starts to shine light into the dark places so that we can see the places where we have blind spots. Places where we think, well, this is how I was raised, so it's just how things work. This is what Christian people do. But no, that's not the case. That's not the case at all. Here's the thing. We all have generational sin that's within us. Every one of us. So what do we do with that? What do we do with it? I say the first thing to do is admit it. And if you're sitting here thinking, well, no, I don't. I'll tell you what. Go to other family members and ask them about you and see what they say. And if they're honest, which usually family is, you're going to find out, whoa, there is stuff there. Admit it. Just admit it. One of the things that we miss today in Protestant evangelical churches is confession. Within Catholicism, confession is one of the main things that is practiced. Yes, we don't have to have a confessional. The last thing I want to do is spend my week sitting in a dark booth and hearing all of your stories of dysfunction and sin and stuff like. Actually, that might be kind of interesting. But really, it's the last thing I really want to do. We can go directly to the Lord. If we need help, we can talk to each other and say, I need prayer, I need encouragement, I need some help with this. Be humble enough and brave enough to trust the Lord. He already knows your propensity to sin. He knows the things you're tempted with. He knows when you slide into sin and temptation and fall. Just admit it. And say, Lord, this is where I am. Don't make excuses for it. We too often make excuses. That's how my father was. That's how my mother was. This is just who I am, and I'm trying to just be who I am. This is my truth. Yeah, well, your truth sucks. Let's just admit that. Let's not play games with it. One of the things in a church like ours that is heavy on grace, there's something that can happen, and I don't ever want us to slide into this issue. A lot of times when we talk about grace as much as we do, people can start to have the idea that sin is okay. And it's not. Sin is an abomination. And we don't understand fully the weight of sin. We look at different sins with different weights. Like, look at the story we're in now. That's a pretty big sin issue. And notice I'm saying it's a pretty big sin issue. I mean, if we had read and Isaac went to, the Philistines with Abimelech, and they asked him, hey, if you're going to stay here, we need to know whether or not this land can support all of your goats you have, and how many goats there are. And, Isaac lied about it and said, I have 300 goats when he really had 325. We'd be like, oh, that's not a big deal at all, right? It's still a lie. It's still a lie. Think about this. We live in this world today with sin, the consequences of sin: disease, death, war, famine, division, disunity, all of these different things. And what was the sin that caused it all? Go all the way back. Remember Genesis chapter 3. They ate something they weren't supposed to eat. They ate something they weren't supposed to eat. Coming up in September, for my 50th birthday, my wife has taken me on a trip. I'm like, wow, what a great present, right? For my 50th birthday, and some of you are like, wow, you're almost 50? What kind of cream do you use? No, I'm looking forward to this. But I know, if I'm going to go on this trip in just a couple months, I want to get fit-ish. I want to get healthier. And I'm trying to be good. I was meeting with another pastor friend of mine this week, Larry Parks, and I'm sitting on his back porch. Cheryl comes out. And Cheryl's just the sweetest lady, and she puts a pile of Oreos right in front of me. Not one, not two. It was a pile of Oreos. I know I'm not supposed to eat those Oreos. They were the mint kind. Oh. I see. Yeah. And I didn't do it. Yeah. I'm only saying it that way for those of you that were like, oh, right? I wasn't supposed to eat them. But let's be real. If I ate the Oreo, would any of you be like, sinner? No, you wouldn't. What did Adam and Eve do? They ate the chocolate cake. They took a piece of fruit from a tree that they were told not to eat, and they ate it. When our children do that nowadays, we put pictures of them on Facebook or Instagram. Oh, how cute. He wasn't supposed to eat that chocolate cake, but look how it's all over their face. That is the weight of sin, that a sin that is seemingly so minor to us, that type of disobedience, caused all the chaos that we see in our world. That's just crazy. As people who walk in the grace of God, always understand the weight of sin. Sin is an abomination to the Lord. Don't justify it. Don't explain it away. Don't say that when God says this is sin, don't look at him and say, no, it's not. Here, Lord, I know you said it's sin, but I don't think you really meant that that was sin. And let's go to the Greek and Hebrew and see if we can redefine it. Don't play games like that. Paul addresses this in Romans chapter 6. He starts out the chapter by saying, what shall we say then? Are we to continue in sin that grace may abound? People were like, hey, if the grace of God is totally understood and magnified by us sinning, then maybe we should just sin more so that grace abounds more, right? And you get that. Have you ever heard somebody else's testimony? Like, I was a drug dealer that used to give drugs to people in nursing homes, and I also am a black market seller of oysters. I don't know. You hear this stuff, and you hear their testimony of how they came to Christ, and you're like, man, my testimony's boring. You don't want a testimony like that. You don't. And some people think like, man, I need to go out there, and if I just blow up with sin and stuff, it's just going to make the grace of God even better. What shall we say then? Are we to continue in sin that grace may abound? By no means. No. How can we who died to sin go on and live in it? In that chapter, he drops down another 11 verses, and again he asks or 15 verses. He asks the question again, what then? Are we to sin because we are not under the law but under grace? Again, the answer, by no means. Because we preach a gospel of grace, because our salvation is a free gift to us. Do we understand that it was not a free gift to him? He paid full price on the cross by his blood to cover our sin. How is it that we could then go on and continue in that life? Paul says, let not sin therefore reign in your mortal body to make you obey its passions. Do not present your members to sin as instruments for unrighteousness, but present yourself to God as those who have been brought from death to life, and your members to God as instruments for righteousness. For sin will have no dominion over you, since you are not under the law, but under grace. It's God's grace that moves us into wanting to walk with him, wanting to live for him, wanting to act like him, wanting to reflect him. I used to have this guilt and this weight in my life where I was at war with sin. I was trying to beat my body into submission, and I did it different ways. I had all kinds of Bible verses that I had memorized. Like, literally, it was this huge list. It was like 50 different verses. And I would sit there, and every time I started feeling temptation, I would just, like a robot, start quoting all of these verses, thinking like that was just going to stop it. I would beat myself up if I was tempted. I just put up all of these different types of roadblocks in my life, checks and balances. And it didn't work. It didn't work at all. I couldn't beat my body into submission to the law. And then, I've said this, and I don't think it sinks in with a lot of us. I didn't understand the gospel. I didn't understand what grace was until like a decade ago. I preached through Romans. And it was like this beautiful light just clicked for me. Once I understood the amazing grace of God, somehow other things started falling away. Just started falling away. And I no longer fell asleep in church. Yeah, I saw that. I'm not saying who. But we'll talk about it at our elders meeting tomorrow night. Oh, goodness. Oh, I'm in trouble. Genesis 26, verse 12. Let's keep going. Isaac sowed in that land and reaped the same year 100-fold. Why? The Lord blessed him. This is how amazing God is. He just fell into the same sin trap that his dad fell into. And yet, because the promises God gave, he still continues to work with Isaac and bless him. It's just amazing. The Lord blessed him. And the man became rich and gained more and more until he became very wealthy. He had possessions and flocks and herds and many servants, so that the Philistines envied him. Now the Philistines had stopped and filled with earth all the wells that his father's servants had dug in the days of Abraham, his father. And Abimelech said to Isaac, "Go away from us, for you are much mightier than we." So Isaac departed from there and encamped in the valley of Gerar and settled there. And Isaac dug again the wells of water that had been dug in the days of Abraham his father, which the Philistines had stopped after the death of Abraham. And he gave them the names that his father had given them. But when Isaac's servants dug in the valley and found there a well of spring water, the herdsmen of Gerar quarreled with Isaac's herdsmen, saying, "The water is ours." So he called the name of the well Esek, because they contended with him. Then they dug another well, and they quarreled over that also. So he called its name Sitnah. And he moved from there and dug another well, and they did not quarrel over it. So he called its name Rehoboth, saying, "For now the Lord has made room for us, and we shall be fruitful in the land." From there he went up to Beersheba, and the Lord appeared to him the same night and said, "I am the God of Abraham your father. Fear not, for I am with you, and I will bless you and multiply your offspring for my servant Abraham's sake." So he built an altar there and called upon the name of the Lord and pitched his tent there. And there Isaac's servants dug a well. When Abimelech went to him from Gerar, and Azuthath, his advisor, and Phicol, the commander of his army, Isaac said to them, "Why have you come to me, seeing that you hate me and have sent me away from you?" They said, "We see plainly that the Lord has been with you." So we said, "Let there be a sworn pact between us, between you and us. And let us make a covenant with you, that you will do us no harm, just as we have not touched you and have done to you nothing but good, and have sent you away in peace. You are now the blessed of the Lord." So he made them a feast, and they ate and drank. In the morning they rose early and exchanged oaths. And Isaac sent them on their way, and they departed from him in peace. That same day Isaac's servants came and told him about the well that they had dug and said, "We have found water." He called it Sheba. Therefore, the name of the city is Beersheba to this day. When Esau was 40 years old, he took Judith, the daughter of Beeri, the Hittite, to be his wife, and Basemath, the father of Elon, the Hittite, and they made life bitter for Isaac and Rebekah. One last point. In the story, you have a man who is blessed by the Lord, a man who is given promises to the Lord. But those promises aren't coming easy for him. First, because of his own propensity to sin, but then also because of the culture that he's living inside of. You look at this, and he's been told, "Be here, take possession of this land, stay in this land. Was it easy for him to stay in the land? No. No. Time after time after time, he has to move his tents. He digs a well, someone covers it up. He digs a well, someone steals it from him. He digs a well, people start threatening him. He's told by the Lord, I'm going to bless you, I'm going to be with you. But that didn't mean that everything was rainbows and unicorns and butterflies for him. It was difficult. It was hard. The Lord comes to him later and reassures him. But walking in the promises of God took stubborn determination. Think about that. Over and over and over again, he's seen the promises seemingly being taken away from him. It would have been so easy, and most likely for us, if we'd been in the situation, it'd be like, all right, I'm done. I'm going somewhere else. Really? I have to dig another well? But he trusted the Lord, and he was stubborn in his walk. How many of you grew up in a family that had stubborn people in it? Anyone ever heard that? I think in families we toss that around as a curse word. You're so stubborn, right? So stubborn. And sometimes it is a curse word unless you are stubborn about the right things. Brothers and sisters, when we come to faith in Christ, we are given promises. The first one, it's so simple. Paul says in Romans, if you confess with your mouth Jesus Christ is Lord and you believe in your heart that God raised him from the dead, what? You will be saved. What an incredible promise. It's the grace of God. It's what he does for us. But that doesn't mean life is going to be easy. We're called to walk with him, to serve him, to tell others about him. Sometimes our sin is going to get in the way. When it does, ask for forgiveness. It's as easy as saying, Lord, you were right, I was wrong. I am sorry. Sometimes we're in a culture where things are going to be stolen from us. Enemies are going to come against us. Other people might be jealous of us. Do you see Isaac going on the attack in any of these times? No, not at all. Go back, look at the culture that Jesus walked in. Were they antagonistic towards him? Did they mock him? Did he go on the attack? Someone's now saying, well, he did sort of make a whip and drive people out of the temple. That was a specific circumstance for a reason. No. Keep on just stubbornly digging the wells, walking with the Lord, trusting him with the promises he's given.